Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your brother in faith, Isa Ibn Matta, here with Sister Kat. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I know you came from really, really far, but we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward you for that. I remember whenever you were sharing your journey to faith, you mentioned you've been Muslim for 16 years now.
Yeah, roughly 16 years, yeah.
Wow. And so taking Shahada so young is definitely probably not something that we really see that often, right? How was your early experience with the Muslim community?
There wasn't much of an experience. I mean, between school and homework and everything else. I did have one family they took me in as a Palestinian family. Mom became ummi. I got really close with them. She taught me my first ayats of Quran. She taught me how to do salah, how to make wudu. Her daughter, who was younger than me at the time, she taught me how to put on hijab. Back then it was this triangle with the pin under the neck. So I didn't really have too much in the way of contact with the community. It wasn't until probably 6 or so years later when I really started practicing my Islam that I started getting a little bit more involved. Yeah.
And so one of the things that probably is super important for the development of the Muslim community, but gets discussed very little, is the status of converts within the masjid, right?
Yeah.
Being Muslim as long as you have been, and especially being like a sister, what are some of your experiences as a convert in the community? Especially seeing communities bud and grow from being a house on a street somewhere to being these super centers that we have now.
Mega masjids, yeah. So it's kind of been hit or miss in the beginning. I really was trying to discover all my Islam by myself. I was like, I don't speak the language. I don't speak Urdu or Arabic. I'm going to have to do this by myself. Eventually figured out I don't have to, but the status in the community, I'd probably say about 10 years ago, it was really kind of like, oh, here's the token convert. Let's use them for fundraising. Let's put them on a flyer. Let's put them in a, ad or whatever, And so it wasn't really a lot of acceptance. It was more of what can we use them for? That's the feeling that I got. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case. And then I'm seeing now where a lot of masjids are coming up with, convert programs. They're gearing more conferences and stuff towards the dawah effort and towards, understanding converts. And so it's nice to see that change has happened. I feel personally for myself, it took a little too long, but, better late than never, right?
Right. Would you say that there is a deference to or a push within the masajid? I mean, I know that you've been in the masajid for at least the better part of the last, deeply involved for the better part of the last 5 years. Right?
Yeah.
So would you say that there is a push to defer to or get advice and counsel from the convert community, or do you still think that maybe one of the ongoing issues we see is especially with the youth, for example, because that's my primary experience, is you have people who have nothing to do with youth making decisions for the youth without consulting the youth, right? So do you see that there are people who have nothing to do with converts making decisions for converts, or do you see that there's kind of this getting consultation? Or?
So in some of the messages I am seeing that where it's people who are born Muslim, came from overseas, and they're making decisions for us. They're deciding our programs for us, stuff like that. There are some where they are kind of referring to the convert community. We do have a masjid in Irving that has a convert imam, so that helps that you have kind of a point of reference. It's getting better. Alhamdulillah, but I'm still seeing a lot of it where it's born Muslims making decisions for convert Muslims.
So convert culture is unique in that, as converts, we don't grow up with, obviously with Islam, gender norms or the rules of intergender relations is clear, right?
Yeah.
But then there are immense cultural overtones to what extent what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, right? And in many ways, some of those things heuristically get blended as the culture is a religion, but we see that that's not always the case.
Yeah.
But as converts, we don't necessarily have the same, we're working from another side of that spectrum, right? In terms of intergender relations. So as a female white convert, what has your experience in terms of like how people treat you gender-wise and as a convert? Because that's like a convergence of like multiple points of it.
Yeah, it's multiple points of convergence right there.
Mm-hmm.
Being white, I feel, so first off, I'm not fully white, I'm only half white, I am half Hispanic.
Okay.
I just have a very fair complexion.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll see that even in the African or the Hispanic community, even in the Desi community, you got them from all different complexions.
Right.
But
I'm sure white.
I know. On the outside, everybody thinks I'm a white convert. So, I mean, you get a little bit more acceptance into the community at that point. Being female, it's harder for me because when you're used to being able to walk up and talk to somebody, I'm from the South. You shake a person's hand. That's just polite. That you don't shake a person's hand, they can't trust you. So that kind of a gender norm of being able to just kind of walk into a room and being able to do what you need to do and then walk out. It sounds crazy, but like with the gender separation and regulations that Islam has, it makes it a little bit harder. Where I work.
Islam or culture?
So I'm gonna say Islam because it starts with Islam. I feel like culture takes it to a whole nother level of extreme. It's like I've seen men literally like dodge completely around me, like almost like I don't exist, like I'm just a pylon. And like, well, no, I'm a human. Like I'm not saying look me in the face and check me out, but at least nod, acknowledge my existence, give me the salam, return my salam, But even at that point, there you'll find that people, men won't even acknowledge your salam. Some of them won't, to that level of like extreme with the gender separation. And again, I don't know if that's Islam or culture, but at this point, it's a little hard to tell sometimes.
Right, and I think maybe as a convert, that's one of the biggest issues that we have is being able to distinguish between Islam and culture, right?
Yeah.
Because the people that we're learning the religion from cannot oftentimes make that distinction between their cultural preferences and biases
and their
the Islamic like tenets of what is acceptable, what is permissible, what is completely out of bounds, right?
So no, I agree with you. That's where a lot of the confusion comes in. Being a convert, you find the people you're learning from are so entrenched in their culture and in their traditions that they can't separate the two. But we as converts tend to learn Islam in a more pure form because we don't have that cultural bias, that millennia of traditions going back. So we tend to be a little bit more educated, and so when we do ask questions or when we do try to correct people, we get, oh, sister, that's not how it's done. Maybe that's not how it's done back home, but what I've learned of Islam, this is what it tells me. Correct me if I'm wrong. They try, but it doesn't work. But that's a huge problem. Is we learn Islam in a more pure form, and they don't always understand that. So the questions and the explanations kind of get, I don't want to say manipulated, they get twisted though, because you can't always, again, separate it.
Right, and I mean, not because alhamdulillah will never play the devil's advocate, but just playing the contrarian in this case. Sometimes as converts, we can also take like a different type of, our culture can kind of blend itself with Islam too a little bit, right? Like maybe, and how we see some Islamic concepts, it's okay, it's not that big of a deal, or yeah, it's a different time, like, kind of having that more free-spirited approach to life from an American, freedom.
Western.
Yeah, we have our own paradigm, right?
We do,
right,
yeah.
That we have to overcome. And so I think one of the more interesting, just putting on my sociologist hat, I think one of the more interesting things is kind of seeing the development and expansion of the convert community, meeting the development and the expansion of the, second and third and fourth generation Muslim, right? Yeah. And eventually, it can't be converts and them, or
them and us. Yeah, it has to come together at some point in time. Yeah.
What do you think is one of the most, or just any ideas that you have about how to kind of get from this us and them, or us versus them sometimes, and just get to like this more unified? Because I'll be honest, in my opinion, born Muslims, they need us. Like, they need us for dawah. They need us to really in order to really understand America, you need people who have really come from that kufr, not just been in the society, but like came from that jahiliyyah in order to really identify and connect with the other side. But on the other hand, maybe not having access to the language or the same extent of scholarship, we need them too. It's definitely symbiotic, right?
Yeah.
What do you think is necessary, especially as a sister, right? Because that's its own conversation about the treatment of sisters in the Muslim community, regardless of convert, regardless of. What do you think is needed to kind of bridge those gaps?
I would say, I mean, it gets bridged a lot with obviously interracial marriages and stuff like that, but it's going to be better. It's going to be better convert care at the end of the day. Just because in my years of experience, I've seen it. You know, somebody takes shahada, everybody wants to give them a hug. Here's your Quran, here's your kufi, have a nice day. Then, you know, oh, well, let me invite this person to Ramadan dinner, or, you know, something, or iftar, you know. There's no consistency. And so I know we need them and they need us, but at the end, if there's no consistency in building and strengthening that relationship between us and them, it's going to remain us and them, you know. That's really where it comes down to.
So what would you say that looks like? Does that look like seeing a convert sister in the shura of a masjid? Or does that look like more convert imams or like more leadership positions from like, what would you say that looks like?
I'm going to go with it's going to be more leadership positions. Women on the Shura Council and more masjids, that I would lead more towards like having more of a female presence in the masjid and in the Muslim community, which is another struggle in and of itself. Having more convert imams would definitely help because, again, you're learning from the people who learned it best. Like, you know, we're the closest, how did they say it? They said we're the closest to the Sahaba because they learned it in the purest form. You know, they learned it straightforward. I don't want to say from the horse's mouth, Allah forgive me, but you know what I mean? I mean, just more leadership roles, allowing us to have more of a presence in the community. You know, I know we only have the 2 Eids and we have all these dawah conferences and ISNA and ICNA, but I am not seeing it as much. We have really great speakers. We have, you know, Saeed Purcell. We have Sohaib Webb, you know. I'm trying to think of a few others and I can't off the top of my head, but
even Embrace,
well, even in the Embrace community, we have, you know, Sheikh Jassi. We have you now in the Embrace community. It's just allowing us to have more of a voice, a face, a presence in the community is going to make all the difference because people are more likely to hang out with the people that they see, right? So if converts see other converts leading the community, they're going to be more likely to be more involved, and not just in dawah though. I mean, medical services, you know, the free clinics that we have, the food bank and donations and stuff that we have, they're more likely to help and have more of a presence when they see those people leading them, you know?
I mean, even to that point, which is a really good one, Jazakallah khairah, is like non-Muslims will be more open to coming to masajid if they don't think it's like
equally the
some
same,
foreign hub of all these people from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Others, they're just a bunch of others. Like, no.
Personally, I have family members that are just like, I don't feel comfortable because it's all these people from somewhere else. It's all these people from other countries. You know, I don't see white farmers, white Americans. I don't see black Americans, you know, in the masjids. So they don't feel as comfortable coming in and asking questions or even just listening, you know. So it's same thing there. Non-Muslims are going to be more likely to come in, do an open doors, open hearts program, do a tour of the masjid, and actually ask questions because they're going to see those faces that they recognize.
Right. And it's really important, right, to make sure that no one is being otherized, right?
True.
As converts, we don't want to be otherized. We don't want our sisters to be seen as others, right? And we don't want even our, Arab-Desi or African community to be seen as others either. But at the same time, we know that prophets were sent to their people, right? And so we want to definitely be in a position when bridging the gaps with the non-Muslim community, the overwhelming majority of the United States, by having people who are like them being able to push that message of Islam, right?
Yeah.
And it's super important. The whole premise of doing Understand Why Islam is so that non-Muslims see that we're people too, right?
Yeah.
being in the church for 8 years before I became Muslim, like the inter-church politics far exceed masjid politics in a completely different way. It's a different beast, right? We save that for another time. don't want to air the dirty.
No, please don't.
But we want them to see, like, look, we have issues too with our youth. Women's place in some churches is a big issue too. We want them to see our humanity so that they can understand.
We're human too. We're
Right.
not an other. We're not
Right.
from another planet. We're not from another world. We're
Exactly.
here. We're with you. We're side by side.
Right.
We all bleed red, but you know, we're human too. We have all the same issues, maybe just in another language.
Right. So what would be your advice then to non-Muslims who would watch this video when it comes to understanding why Islam?
I know we're in the era of COVID, so take caution, but I would say visit a masjid. Find an Islamic page on Facebook. I know they have some for like new Muslims and stuff. You can go in and there's thousands of people there, and they openly accept any question, any point of view. You know, Salafi this, or Saudi says this, or I don't know, this guy who knows a guy who knows a sheikh who told me one time this story. Whatever it is, ask the questions, because that's the only way you're going to find any kind of an understanding, whether it's physics or math, whatever it is, medical, interpersonal. You're going to find that just by asking questions.
Thank you so much, Sister Kat. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we thank all of you for taking the time to listen. And hopefully this will help you understand why Islam. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.